Hello everyone, my name is Brijender Singh and I am the faculty here at Vajiram for two papers, the ethics paper and the essay paper. Now, very briefly, small interaction with you as far as ethics is concerned. Now, for any student who's giving the civil services exam, if you want to clear your mains with a good score, if you want to clear your final interview and make it to the list with a good service, with a good rank, there are two papers that must go over well for you. The first is the essay paper, the second is the ethics paper. The reason for that is simple, because it is only in these two papers that a score of 125 is comfortably possible. And today we'll have a brief discussion on how exactly you can get a score like this in the ethics paper. Now, to be honest with you, ethics is very, very simple, very, very easy. The syllabus is very, very small. But in the ethics paper, to get good marks, the mistake that students usually make is that they focus on studying a lot. They read from a lot of sources, they read a lot of books. The mistake that they make is, because they read a lot, their basic concepts are not very clear. In the ethics paper, very simply, if you want to score well, there are two things you need to do. Number one, you will need conceptual clarity. And number two, when you're writing an answer, the value of your answer will depend upon the quality of examples that you add to it. These two things, if they're found in your answer, if your concepts are correct, if your example is small, brief, but relevant to the question, high probability that the examiner will mark you generously. Now, to understand how you do that, let me take one brief topic over here, which is neutrality and absolute neutrality. Now, as far as neutrality is concerned, first the theory, first the basic understanding, and then we'll take a look at what exactly or how exactly you put it across. Now, what is neutrality? Neutrality is very simply the principle of working without reservation and with devotion towards the success of every government which is lawfully in power. Now, this is your theory. More importantly, what is the underlying concept? The underlying concept over here, now why is a civil servant expected to be neutral? Because every bureaucrat is expected to be subordinate to the political executive. Why is the bureaucrat subordinate to the political executive? Because when the politician is voted into power, for the next 5 years, the politician, he or she, represents the mandate of the people. For the next 5 years, the people have decided. In a democracy, it is the people who run the government. So the people have decided that for the next 5 years, this political executive will determine which policies, which schemes, which plans are to be executed by the government. Since for these 5 years, the politician represents the public mandate, number one, the bureaucrat is expected to be subordinate to the political executive. Number two, since you are subordinate to the political executive, you are duty bound to obey the political executive. The only condition over here is when we say that you're duty bound to obey the politician, you must remember that there's a difference between obeying and blindly obeying. A bureaucrat is expected to obey the political executive, is expected to obey the orders given by the politician, but not to blindly obey them. Why should you not blindly obey them? This is the question students ask in class sometimes. That if I'm given an order, how can I defy the order? How can I disagree with the order? How can I not obey it? Because again, you're not a machine. You're a thinking human being. You are expected to function as a bureaucrat and take only those decisions, obey only those orders which are promoting the welfare of the public. To take a small example here, I don't know whether the story is right or wrong, whether it is true or false. But apparently the story goes that many years back, maybe in India, maybe in some other country, there was this one minister. This minister was said to be very corrupt, was said to be the kind of person, if you gave him the right amount of money, any work you wanted, he would get it done for you. One day, this very powerful businessman went to meet this minister and told the minister that I need to get a certain work done from you and the work is a little urgent. The minister told him, okay, I will, require X amount of money from you as a bribe. The businessman said, okay. He said, I'll definitely pay you the money. I am not carrying the money right now, but you please approve my paperwork at the moment. The minister, trusting the businessman, took that file, whatever the matter was, took the file and on the file wrote the word approved. Now, the moment the minister says approved, the file has been passed, the project has been cleared and the work can start. Now, the minister was very trusting. He did the right thing. The businessman, on the other hand, was a little clever. The businessman realized that nobody can tamper with government files. Nobody can tamper with government records. So he realized that the minister has already approved my file. I don't need to pay him any bribe. So once he went away from there, the businessman refused to give the money. The minister was very worried. He didn't know what to do. He felt he had been cheated. So the minister, now for advice, called his bureaucrat. Told the bureaucrat what had happened, that I've cleared his file, but he's not paying the money. Bureaucrat said that, sir, you don't have to worry. You have a very simple solution for this. Where you've written approved, on top of that, just write the word not. And the file that was approved now becomes not approved. Absolutely right. Minister writes this. Sitting in his home, the businessman realizes that the minister is smarter than I thought. Businessman comes running back to the minister, apologizes to him. Minister said, don't worry, I will still do your work. But condition is, this time you have to give me double the amount of money as a bribe. The businessman was mentally prepared for this. This time he was carrying the money. He gave the money to the minister. Minister took the money. Businessman went away. But now the minister was stuck. He was stuck because he had taken the money and yet a government file said not approved. Again, he calls the bureaucrat, says, now what do I do? Bureaucrat says, sir, no problem at all. Where you've written the word not, just add an E at the end and it becomes not approved. Now, I don't know, again, whether the story is right or wrong, whether it is fictional, whether it is from India, somewhere else. But this is what a bureaucrat is not supposed to do. And I repeat that, what a bureaucrat is not supposed to do. Now, in this case, the bureaucrat is obeying the minister, is obeying the politician, but he's blindly obeying him. And this blind obedience, in one word, if you behave this way, what is this called? This is what you call corruption. This is something that you're not supposed to do. Which is why we say that bureaucrats are expected to be neutral. They are duty bound to obey the orders of the political executive, but you should not blindly obey the orders. Then what are you supposed to do? Now, this kind of a feature where you blindly obey the politician, where you blindly obey the superior that you've got, this is what you refer to as blind obedience. And blind obedience very often will lead you to moral corruption. Now, what is moral corruption? Moral corruption is corruption that is not legal corruption. What is legal corruption? Legal corruption is when you are directly involved in violating a law, in violating a rule, in violating a regulation. In legal corruption, you are directly guilty of violating a law, a rule, or a regulation. In moral corruption, on the other hand, anything that you're doing is not violating a law, is not violating any rule, and yet almost any person on the planet can tell you that what you've done was definitely not right. Now, to understand what moral corruption is, like I said, you should add examples. Let me add two examples here. Number one, the Holocaust, which we saw in Europe during the Second World War. And number two, Jallianwala Bagh. Now, the Holocaust that happened in Europe, how many people lost their lives? 6 million, which is 60 lakh Jews. These 60 lakh Jews were killed first by planning, by constructing, by very systematically organizing centers that were meant for the mass extermination of human beings. What are those centers called? They are what we today remember as concentration camps. But if these concentration camps were so systematically made, and by the way, please remember, the Holocaust lasted for barely about 5 years. In 5 years, if you're killing 60 lakh Jews, that's 12 lakh on average per year, 1 lakh per month. So if you're killing them, you will need the active involvement, the active support of every bureaucrat, every engineer, every doctor, every architect, almost every person working in the German state, working in the German society. Now, after these 60 lakh people were killed, once the war ended, the trials at Nuremberg started, the war trials. In these war trials, one German after the other, German bureaucrats, German judges, German soldiers, doctors were asked the same question: why did you commit this crime against humanity? And the very simple, uniform answer was that we were only obeying orders. Are you expected to obey orders? Answer is yes. But in this case, what are you doing? You're not just obeying orders, you've started obeying the orders blindly. And that is what we call moral corruption. This is why we say that a bureaucrat is expected to be neutral. You should not become absolutely neutral. You should not become blindly obedient. Similarly, if I get the same issue a little closer home, at home in India, now this is the 13th of April 1919, what we today remember as the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. In the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, everyone remembers two people. Number one, the Indian crowd that was sitting there that day, and number two, General Dyer. What most people don't remember and don't think about seriously is the soldiers who fired upon the crowd. Now these soldiers are standing there. They notice that in front of them is a crowd of Indians who are sitting there peacefully demanding just one thing, the release of their leaders. General Dyer, without any warning, what could he have done? Tell the crowd that you're in violation of the law, you're not allowed to congregate here, go back home. Number two, if the Indians don't listen to you, you can fire if you want, but fire into the air, not into the crowd. Number three, you can repeat the warning. Number four, you can order a lathi charge. But instead of using the many options that he could have, General Dyer immediately started by ordering his soldiers to fire upon the crowd. And when they fired, they did not fire with the intention to warn, the intention to scare. They fired with the intention to kill. And how do we know that they fired with the intention to kill? Because when the soldiers started firing upon the crowd, the people, to save themselves, jumped into the well. And when they jumped into the well, the soldiers did not leave them alone. They fired into the well to ensure that they killed the Indians even there. Now, these soldiers, if you think about them, they know that the crowd is innocent. They know that a crowd is unarmed. They know that the crowd comprises of senior citizens, women and children. And yet, without thinking once, they blindly obey their orders. Now, if you look at it legally, have they violated any law? No. Have they broken any procedures? No. Have they showed any insubordination towards their superior? No. And yet every single person will tell you that what these soldiers did that day, more than a century back, was definitely wrong. What is this called? This again is what you call blind obedience. This is what you call absolute neutrality. Which is why we say again that whenever you're given an order, in any capacity that you're working, number one, once you're given an order, use your discretion. Number two, assess the nature of the order. And number three, then decide what an appropriate response to that order would be. Now here, a common question from students is, how do I know what is the right or the wrong response? How do I know which order I should obey or I should disobey? Here, there are two simple principles that you use. Number one is your constitution, and number two is the principle of public welfare. Any decision that violates your constitution, any order that violates your constitution, or number two, any order, any decision that harms public welfare will necessarily be considered wrong. Keeping these two principles in mind, number one again, use your discretion, assess the nature of the order, and then decide what an appropriate response to that order would be. And again, the theory is simple, the concept is simple. Two things you will keep in mind. Number one, conceptual clarity. And number two, when you're writing your answers, use brief, appropriate, relevant examples. They will really add to the quality of your answer and really improve the marks that you get in this paper. All right. Hopefully, you would have understood the basics over here. Thank you very much.